Hey, it's Brendan Allen from ComicCon.com. Today's guest, we have with us Dirk Manning, author of Tales of Mr. Ree, Adventures of Cthulhu Jr. and Friends. I can never say Cthulhu, man. It always screws me up. And Hope. Today we're going to talk about a Kickstarter that he's doing with living legend Arn Anderson, multi-time champion, NWA National Tag Team Champion, NWA World TV title twice, World Tag Titles at NWA 3 times. The man's got more accolades than you can count on both hands and toes. He's a wrestler's wrestler. He's a living legend. And you got to write a book with him. Tell us about the book.
Yeah, man. Well, first off, thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. The book in question is Arn Anderson, My Life as the Enforcer. It's currently running on Kickstarter from SourcePoint Press. People can go to arncomic.com and check it out. And this is a book all about the life of, I guess, the early life and then in-ring career of Arn Anderson, who, I think, as you mentioned, is really a professional wrestler. I think every one of your favorite wrestler is Arn Anderson. you know, Fascinating guy, like you said, founder of the Four Horsemen. He's an innovator of a lot of things that are now used in the ring to this day. And this is about his life. This is about how he came up, his life growing up, entering professional wrestling, and then really revolutionizing professional wrestling, but also doing that, always being, in a way, the guy behind the guy, or the guy whose job it was to put other people over, whether it was his television champion or member of the Four Horsemen or things like that. So it's a fascinating book. It's a fascinating story. I think this is a story that people who obviously that are professional wrestling fans will want to go to arncomic.com, check it out, get the Kickstarter exclusive hardcover, because it's a book that wrestling fans especially going to enjoy. But I also think people that read this book and get a chance to read Arn's story are also going to see that this is really a story about triumph and overcoming hardship. Arn did not have a very easy life growing up, and he was this guy that grew up, in rural Georgia, and how he came up and revolutionized the world of professional wrestling.
Well, I think a lot of people know about his in-ring work, and a lot of people know about the work that like Dusty Rhodes did behind the scenes at Gorilla Monsoon. But I think if you're not a hardcore wrestling fan, you don't really understand how much Arn Anderson contributed to the sport even after he finished wrestling. How many people he mentored and trained, and
Absolutely.
the matches that he booked and produced.
Yeah, yeah. I have not talked about this in any other interview ever, and I'll give you another exclusive. Uh, the book opens up, and the way the book is structured, we have two artists on the book. We have Sean Daly and Colm Griffin. Sean Daly does all like the modern present day Arn stuff, and then we have these extended flashback sequences that Colm Griffin draws. And the book opens with Sean Daly with modern day Arn, and he's in the gym talking to the audience, or I guess talking to the person that's kind of interviewing him for the book. And he talks about how he is the only wrestler ever who has had victories over Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, and Andre the Giant.
Oh wow! When did he wrestle Andre?
It was a tag match. But scoreboard, his team won over Andre.
Count it,
And
count it.
right. So there's a slight, a minor asterisk to it. But anytime you can beat Andre the Giant, and the
Sure.
fact that Andre the Giant lets you beat him,
Oh yeah. No, I think Andre was notorious for like the stuff backstage that he would allow or disallow for different people or different performers or whatever to put him
yeah,
over. He's
yeah.
either going to put you over a little bit or a lot, and yeah,
Uh-huh. And it was his call.
right,
It's he
100%.
Andre. You're on Andre's time. So here's Arn, who has all these accolades combined with all the other stuff he's done. Founded the Four Horsemen and all these things. You know what he never had? His whole in-ring career, and this is how we open the book talking about this. He never had a T-shirt.
Now you got me
Right,
looking. Now you got
right.
me looking because I can't think of one. You're
In
right.
his whole in-ring career. Now he has had merch made now that he is actually retired as an in-ring performer. But his whole in-ring career, he never had a T-shirt.
Look at that. You're right. I mean,
Well,
of
yeah,
course you're right.
or
You did
yeah,
all the yeah, and
yeah,
Arn would
but
know.
yeah, and that's
There's
how we
some that are
open the book.
made that look like they're retro or whatever, but they're not from the time period. Like here's a
No,
red ringer and
no,
stuff like that. It looks fantastic, but you're right. Yeah.
and that's one of the things that I think really encapsulates Arn's story. Like you said it yourself. Every wrestling fan knows Arn Anderson, but anybody who's ever watched wrestling knows the impact of Arn Anderson, even if they don't know this guy personally, who he's coached, who he's mentored, what he's done. And he's
Mhm.
always been the guy putting over the guy. I
Right.
like to say that this takes nothing away from someone like Ric Flair, but Ric Flair is Ric Flair because he has Arn Anderson behind him in the Four Horsemen
Exactly.
during that stretch of his career, right?
It was Stan Hansen's, WWE, induction, to the Hall of Fame or whatever that was giving credit to all the carpenters. He wasn't calling anybody a jobber, but he said the carpenters because there are
Mhm.
these people in the business that without them, you have no career because everybody can't go out
Right.
and shine every minute of every match. You have to
Mhm.
have these people that make you look good. And, Arn Anderson classically, he's held plenty of titles. I mean, I just listed off, there's like
Right.
17 of them, but
Right.
he also was that guy that he looked good when he won or when he lost, but he made you look good whether he won or lost.
And that was one of his biggest points of pride is he talks about he credits now like for modern wrestling ones like FTR being this type of team as well. Arn talked about
Mhm.
his
Oh, yeah.
job was to make you look good in the ring. And he even said, he goes, that's what's good for the business. He goes, because if you come in the ring with the Four Horsemen, you come in the ring with Arn Anderson, and whether Arn Anderson wins or loses, if you have a competitive match with him for 15, 20 minutes,
Mhm.
that's how you make talent. That's how
Right.
you make stars. And that's Arn in a nutshell. And that's one of the reasons why it was so fascinating to write this book with him and to tell his story and to get to participate in telling his story. He's not a
I'm
guy that
almost more interested in the stuff that didn't make the book than the stuff that did,
you
because
know,
I'm sure that he's got road stories, from
yeah,
driving around with Ric Flair and yeah.
I'll
Um,
tell you this too. It's funny. The story that made me want to work with Arn is, and I'm sure we'll talk shortly about the genesis how this book came together. But one of the precursors was I got to have dinner with Arn and Brock, and it was Travis McIntyre from Source Point Press, our editor Drina Joe, his son Brock was there, Mike Dawkins, the gimmick attorney, who helps a lot of wrestlers now protect their names and their gimmicks. We were all having dinner, and we were talking, and this was kind of like the feeling out process if we're going to do this book, or if I was going to be the one to write the book, quite frankly, having worked with Tony, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to do another wrestling book or not, despite Arn being a legend. Um, Spoiler, I did. But there's a story he told at that dinner, and as much as I wanted to get it into the book, it just it would have felt shoehorned in. And maybe if we get to the point where we unlock stretch goals, we do some bonus stories or something, I'll include this one. But yeah, he this book is 128 pages.
mhm.
It could have been 300. It could have been. I mean, we just
Well, that
cover his
leaves
life growing up in his in-ring career. This book could have been 300, easily 300 pages, and been
but
just as fast.
that leaves the door open later to come back and go, "Here's the 2nd volume and 3rd
Right,
volume," or whatever later. Yeah, that's
right,
great.
right.
So, you started talking a little bit about how the book came together, and you mentioned
Yeah,
Tony Schiavone's book, Butts and Seats. I picked that up
mhm,
from you, in New York,
yeah,
what was that, October? I
yeah,
read it,
yeah.
it's a great book.
Thank
So,
you.
you got together with Tony, and
Mhm,
you made Tony's book, and Tony
mhm,
is friends with Arn, and
mhm.
somehow that all shoehorned into this book. Tell us a little bit about how that came together.
Yeah, Mike Dawkins, and again, he goes online as the game attorney. He's the guy that brought Tony and I together originally to do butts and seats, which my gosh, when you talk about a lightning in the bottle campaign, we did over $135,000 on Kickstarter on that. Uh, we wrote the book and created the book during a pandemic. I mean, got to give 24 different artists work and stuff like that. Um, it was a really cool experience, right? And people that know me a lot of times know that I'm mainly like I do a lot of creator owned stuff, and I'm mainly a horror guy on top of that. I've always been a lifelong wrestling fan. I think you and I, when we talk to New York and things like that, we talk wrestling, and when I'm not working, I love talking wrestling and things like that. So it was really cool to do the Tony book, right? And it was a cool check mark. We had an amazing Kickstarter. During those very hard times of the pandemic to be able to give so many artists work and create this book and just have the first ever original graphic novel advertised on cable television with butts and seats. I checked a lot of boxes with that campaign, right? Um, and then Mike gets a hold of me and he goes, Arn Anderson was kind of joking around. He's like, do I get a comic? Could I do this too? You know, and again, it was like, oh man, wow. Working with Tony was great. You know, we had a blast working with Tony. It was such a treat to work with him. And to now, and that was like a wrestling adjacent book in a certain way. I mean, and that's not to discredit Tony's contributions to the industry, which are massive, and his involvement. But now you get the opportunity to work with Arn Anderson.
Mhm.
You know, again, your favorite wrestler. And I'm like, oh man, so we have dinner, talk and stuff like that. And the question became whether or not maybe I would help shepherd this project and hand it off to another writer or something like that. But talking to Arn and stuff like that, his story became it's so fascinating. And also, I'm going to tell you the big thing with Arn is his approach to life. And I'm not trying to put the guy over any more than he needs to be put over. He's humble and he's
Mhm.
a gentleman and he's hard pressed to even put himself over. And what I quickly realized with Arn was that he's not only has he been the guy that kind of elevates everyone around him, he takes, I think, a certain amount of pride in that, in not being the guy to have to put himself over. And
Mhm.
for people that aren't into wrestling, I'm saying he's not a guy who needs to make himself the center of all the attention.
I think we've said enough terms already that the people who are not watching wrestling are going to be looking up a few things here.
Right, right. Sorry, yeah, I'm not trying to, not trying to be a mark or anything like that, but um, he doesn't have to be the center of it. You know, he doesn't have to be the guy that has the belt all the time. You know, he doesn't
Right.
have to be the guy that wins every match. He was okay being this cowardly heel at times and playing that
Well,
persona, or all these things that he did in his career. You know,
as
to put him
many of
over.
the great moments that I can think of for Arn Anderson where he's wearing a belt, there are equally or more that he's not. That he's
Hmm.
a side piece that's going on to somebody else's story, or that
Hmm.
just the match alone, or just the build up to the match alone is enough to tell the story. You don't necessarily need to have gold on him. So it's great that a bunch of promotions, NWA, WCW, WWE, put belts on him and put him in
Uh,
those situations, but he never needed it.
no, 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 and he's a guy that, it's funny, like over the we created the book over Zoom, right? And just like we did with Tony's book, and we had these Zoom calls and stuff. And Arn's a guy who, again, I would almost try to kind of like chip away at this facade. What I thought was, maybe this is a facade. You know, maybe he's working me right now. Maybe he's not as humble as he's coming off, but he is. You know, and he's not a guy who needed the belt. He treats the wrestling business like a business, and he's very invested in his whole career, even as a worker, as a performer, as an athlete. He was very invested in protecting the business and growing the business. We see that now with his son, Brock, getting involved in being an active wrestler. And
I see
it
how
makes
Brock
me
is listed under their real name and under Anderson in Arn's profile because I was looking up for the titles and stuff. I was like, he doesn't have two sons named Brock. Like,
right, right, right. Yeah. But, but I'll tell you, man, it's fascinating because even when I did the book with Tony, and I've done other books with other, celebrities, I don't, however you want to quantify that, but doing stuff, books with like the Harp Twins, and doing the Haunted Highons with Twisted, which, again, very fortunate and flattered, has been nominated for a couple of Ringo Awards. So these are books that people read and check out and enjoy. Whenever you do a book with a real person, and this was even my trepidation always starting something like that is this just going to be a vanity project for them? And am I going to spend all my time working on this book just as a vehicle to accentuate them to a ridiculous degree?
right.
You know,
And there are situations both, in New York. I talked to a lot of people. I got a lot of books to read. There are some books that I got that are from those celebrity people that was just like, I'm not gonna bag on it or anything like that. But then
right, right, right.
you've got the books that are out there that are just, Daryl McDaniels is making fantastic comics. DMC is known
Mhm.
as a
Oh
rapper and
wow,
all these different things,
yeah,
whatever. And you talk to him, and the guy is just so incredibly humble and just
yes,
such a genuine guy to talk to. And he really just wants to put people over. So he's
yes.
bringing in graffiti artists to do the covers because they do graffiti and it's art and it's going to look great on this cover or whatever. And he's making all these
Mhm.
different connections from different genres and different media. outlets and things like that, and making
Yeah,
it work in comics, and he's making it work really well.
and he's down in Artist Alley. You
Mhm,
know, he's down there with the creators. You're right, and again, I mentioned Haunted Highlands before. Working with Twisted, they I give them a lot of credit because they let me have fun with their characters based on them.
mhm,
You know, and it's not a vanity project, like you said, man. I mean, you can read anybody can read a book, and you can tell if this is a book where they're interested in telling a good story, or this is a book where they're interested in putting themselves over and shining themselves in a
right.
perhaps ridiculously heroic light.
Mhm.
And that's not anything I've ever been interested in. I want to tell a
Have
good
you seen
story.
have you seen the Ultimate Warrior comics?
I got a buddy that collects copies of it. And again, I mean, he's not alone in that. There's a lot. And again, I don't like to slag on anything. There's too many good things to talk about, but we can tell, right? You can tell
Yeah.
when there's a book out there that its sole purpose is to make the subject of the book look good. And,
Mhm.
and that's not to say that,
Or to pitch a movie script or to pitch a
yeah, and that's not to say to each their own. Do what you want, but
Oh,
that's not
absolutely.
what I want to do. And to Arn's credit, that's not what he wanted to do. He wanted to tell his real story. He wrote a book about 20 some years ago, but it was very kayfabe. It was very
Right. Which was the
intimate.
style at the time.
Which right. He
Which
was
was the style at the
protecting the
time.
business.
Right.
Now he's talking about. Let me talk about growing up in rural Georgia,
Mm.
and let me talk about some of the things that I went through that were very very difficult. And Arn has said a couple times to me privately, and he said publicly. He goes, if people who are have had a hard life read this book and they realize that you can overcome adversity, he goes, the book was a success before we even get to the wrestling.
Yep.
That's Arn. That's what he
That's
does.
fantastic.
And if he was here with us right now, I'm not gonna go as far as he'd be blushing, but I don't want to get one of those last spine busters he has left in the chamber. But
Nice.
that's what made this a fascinating book. That's what made me want to jump in and do this book as well. And I can't wait for people to read it. I can't wait
Right
for
on.
people to check it out.
So you talked about his novel that he did or his memoir that he did previously,
Yeah.
but now he's making a comic. You said kind of how
Mhm.
that came together, but why an OGN? Why a full length graphic novel? Why Kickstarter? Why not floppies or a like limited series for this one?
When you go to approach a book like this, I think the format is you really have to look at the format that's going to honor the story. We have, and again, I'm going to go back to Butts and Seats. We had a lot of success with Butts and Seats. It would have been very easy to remodel and repackage what we did with Butts and Seats, which is a 10 chapter book with 10 different artists, each one a different art style, and do that. But I didn't want Arn's book to be Butts and Seats 2.0. Arn's story is his own story. Arn is his own man. And when I started to look at what the crux of the story was with Arn, which was this guy who's always behind the guy that's putting people over, the guy that's overcome this adversity, this guy that revolutionized the industry. Um, I realized what I wanted to do is have two artists on this book. I wanted to have a modern Arn who, kind of stole a page in a way from or was influenced by Interview with the Vampire. You never see who
Mhm.
Arn's talking to, but the book starts with modern Arn, and I was going to have talking to this interviewer about his life. And I wanted a certain style of art for modern Arn.
Mhm.
Then these extended flashback sequences with a second artist with a very different style. So I went with Sean Daly for the modern art. And Sean Daly did a book for Source Point Press called Samurai Grandpa, which is a perfect companion in a way to Arn Anderson. Arn is still a guy that could crack either one of us and have like
Now I want to
fixable.
see you call him Samurai Grandpa to his face and watch that spine buster.
Yeah, that'll be. I told him I say that with great reverence. Great reverence. Because again, Arn could just snap us in half without breaking a sweat. But Sean has a very watercolory style, blocky style, and I won't say cartoonish, but a very animated style. Then for the extended flashback sequences, when we're going to see other wrestlers, and we're going to see JYD, we're going to see Dusty Rhodes, we're going to see the Four Horsemen, we're going to see Rick Flair, we're going to see all these other people in Arn's life. I wanted an artist who I knew could depict them. I don't want to say photorealistically, but not as stylized. Well, Colm Griffin did the chapter in Butts and Seats called Butts and Seats, which he depicted multiple wrestlers in that chapter. So to bring back Colm to get to do something long form with him, it was a no brainer. That then dictated the form of the book. And it's funny because I knew that I wanted to get the book to about 120-ish pages. But like I said earlier, we could have gone 300. We
Mhm.
could have gone 300 easily. So this was one of the most difficult projects I've ever written, where there's so much I had to, I don't want to say cut out, but I had to streamline it. And one of the things I realized pretty early on to make that happen was, and I'm just going to tell you right now, um, this is not a book where we're illustrating multiple matches from Arn Anderson,
Mhm.
right? You see a lot of Arn in the ring, a lot of Arn's life stories in the ring, but you're not going to get 5 or 6 page sequences with here's this classic match he had where it's
Mhm.
illustrated. That stuff's on the internet, right? You can go to YouTube, you can go to WWE Network. Arn has his own podcast, for God's sake, when he talks about these matches. But what I wanted to do was show Arn's life and weave in and out through modern Arn, past Arn, modern Arn, past Arn, and that's best told in an OGN. When you don't have to worry about sticking the landing every 22 pages and leave it on a cliffhanger to come to the next thing.
Mhm.
Um, and honestly, as you can probably tell by my office here, I like books to look really good on your bookshelf. And what we're doing with this Kickstarter is we're going to do a Kickstarter exclusive hardcover of the book. So people who purchase this book through arncomic.com on Kickstarter before the campaign ends on December 16th, you will get the hardcover edition of the book. And what we do the hardcover is very limited edition. Not only that, this is the only way you get the stretch goals as well. So what we're doing is with this book, you can get stretch goals. If you get any pledge includes a hardcover, you get a book plate in it, and we're unlocking what Art has graciously allowed us to call the four horsemen of comic signatures. Um, you're right. Again, not trying to
Trademark.
put myself over, but it was just too funny to pass up. So right now you get my signature on it, um, Colm Griffin. We're about to unlock Sean Daly. And then the last signature, of course, the four corners of this book plate that'll go in the hardcover is going to be Arn Anderson. This is especially noteworthy because Colm lives in Ireland. Sean lives in Canada. And then Arn and I, of course, live in the United States. I'm not going to say you'll never see all four of us at a signing, but if you do, you're probably going to have to travel to get there, and you're probably going to have to pay to get in. This is free with the book. You order the book through arncomic.com. You not only get the limited edition hardcover, but then you also get the full, potentially at least the four signatures for free if we unlock enough stretch
Mhm.
goals. And if we unlock those four, well, anyone that's seen me run a Kickstarter knows what I do. I just
Yeah,
keep
no, and
throwing in more stuff.
that is absolutely, absolutely noteworthy, those 4 signatures on there for geography alone, because,
Yeah,
we did a charity thing, for Winnebago Graveyard with Allison Sampson and Steve Niles. Steve Niles is here in California, but getting
right.
the paper to the UK for Allison to sign it and getting it back was such a pain in the butt. Like, that's pretty
Hmm.
impressive that you've got that all worked out to go 3 different countries, 4 different signatures.
Yeah.
Even going from coast to coast is impressive.
Yeah,
So, you
it's going to be pretty wild. And I'm really excited. This will be the most, I've done a number of Kickstarters. This will be the most multinational global stretch goal campaign I've ever run. So I'm pretty excited about it.
so the URL again was Arn.
Comic.com. So
Right,
ARN
okay.
comic, all one word, arncomic.com. Or if you go to kickstarter.com and just type in Arn, ARN Anderson, it'll come right up. It's called Arn Anderson, My Life is the Enforcer.
Cool, and you're $100 away from your next stretch goal. Your final stretch goal is $1,000 beyond that. 17 days left to go. You won't say it, but I'm going to say it. It's pretty likely that those 4 signatures are going to hit that book plate. You can get a
Yeah.
PDF of the book for $10. You
Hmm.
get physical copies starting at 25,
25 you get the trade
and
paperback, and 40 you get the hardcover. And that's the other thing too. This whole campaign, what you see for US backers, what you see is what you pay. Free shipping.
oh, cool.
We're not tacking shipping out at the end of the campaign. It's free shipping. If you're in the United States, what you see is what you pay. If you're international, I mean international postage is insane right now. But
Mhm.
I work with SourcePoint Press and we make sure that we make that as reasonable as possible to ship it overseas. But our friends in the United States, if you get the hardcover for $40, That's it. We
That's one
unlock
of
all four
my
signatures in the
pet
book free.
peeves, man, is when you get the backer kit and it's like, "Hey, it's $45 for shipping." And you're like, "What? I already
I
paid you
know.
$400."
Right, right. And you know, and again, I'm not going to begrudge the way people do things. That's not the way I like to do things. Right
Sure.
now, and we advertise that free US shipping, all the stretch goals, all the bonuses. As long as you get at least the hardcover, the $40, anything past it goes in. My personal favorite, and I'm just going to be real. I always love doing this pledge level is to give me everything. You get the
Mm,
hardcover, so you get like the nice hardcover edition. You get the trade paperback, which is cool because then you got like your reader copy, you know, that you can
mhm.
like lend your friends and
Yeah.
stuff. You get the T-shirt, you get the lithograph, and then you get all the stretch goal stuff. You get everything at that pledge level. So
Well, you
that's
guys have a cameo on there too at one of the higher levels, right?
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
my favorite. I love doing that. I'm in Christopher Sabella book as a butler at Harry Houdini's house, and that's just dude,
Love it.
if you could see the other walls in my bar, I collect so much Houdini stuff. It's every oh, here's one. Here's a action
Yeah,
figure behind me. But yeah, no, I'm a butler in Harry Houdini's thing. I love that comic for no other reason than there's me, there's Houdini. I'm in it. Like,
yeah. No, right. It's so much fun to do stuff like that. Yeah, I know it, and that's it. We have some pledge levels where you can actually have a uh, talk time with Arn. So you get everything in the Give Me Everything, and you get personal time with Arn Anderson on a Zoom call,
that's
and you
really
just get to
cool.
chop it up with him. Which
That's
again,
really cool.
it's a neat opportunity. Even at a convention, you don't get that much time. There's always a line behind you and things like that.
Hmm.
There's time just to sit down and chat with Arn. Which I mean, you know, even scheduling interviews like this, he's very busy. It's very hard to to get to get
Hmm.
him, but he's committed to doing that for a couple backers as well. So that's a really neat opportunity as well.
Right on. Well, I think we're getting the high sign from our producer Eric over there. So I want to thank you, Dirk, for coming on today and talking with us about the book. You can find that at arncomic.com or just go to Kickstarter and search Arn Anderson Comic. And
Mhm.
you can get the book for as little as $10, or you can be in it for $444. So thank you very much.
No, man, I appreciate you. And if people want to stay in touch, they can find me on social media at Dirk Manning or dirkmanning.com is my website. But the main thing, honestly, go to arncomic.com. If you have a wrestling fan in your life who you want to get something nice for, or you just want to check out a gorgeously illustrated book with a very inspirational story,
If you
arncomic.com.
don't know anything about wrestling, I guarantee you, if you buy this book for a wrestling fan, they're going to appreciate it because they know who Arn Anderson
They
is.
will lose their minds. And especially
Yeah,
that limited edition hardcover, just gorgeous. So, but yeah, thank you
nice.
for letting me come and talk about it, man. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.